Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like.
Lena sat on the edge of their unmade bed, staring at her husband Mark as he punched out a final message on his phone. She felt that familiar twist in her stomach, a mixture of doubt and resentment growing like a fast-spreading vine. The thought of what he might be saying to his ex sent her heart racing. Not again. The familiar sound of their son, Elijah, laughing in the living room shattered her thoughts. She sighed deeply, pushing aside the nagging feeling that had woven its way through the fabric of their marriage since the beginning. It was as if a cold wind blew through her heart, chilling her to the bone. She turned her gaze to the open window, the evening light casting shadows across the room, like memories flickering in the dark, memories of their early days, when everything seemed so simple. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that had begun to taint those brighter moments. "Are you coming to join us?" Mark's voice lingered with that practiced warmth that used to envelop her like a soft blanket, but now felt stifling. She frowned, ripping the softness of the quilt beneath her fingers. "Yeah, in a minute," she replied, the tension taut between them. She hated feeling like this, like her emotions were battling against the lies she had long buried beneath protocols of marital love. As he walked out, she turned back to the window, taking a deep breath. The sun had dipped low, nearly swallowed by the horizon, and her thoughts turned again to years, a decade of choices and missteps. Since that first moment they'd met at the art gallery, she had wanted to believe that all their struggles could be quashed by love. But love wasn't holding them together. It was the skeleton of unfulfilled promises, and she was terrified of what the truth would bring. Hours later, as the stars shone through the darkness, Lena sat alone in the dim glow of their kitchen, the shadows growing deeper. She was cautious, having picked up on clues of his lingering connection with Jill, his ex-girlfriend. It was a connection that had persisted long after their respective relationships ended, an uninvited ghost at every family dinner, every anniversary, every moment they tried to forget the pain. "Lena? Lena." Mark's voice broke through the silence, filling her with dread. He surprised her with the suddenness of his presence, standing tall against the doorway, a silhouette of the man she had once thought she loved fiercely. Now he hovered behind her, something unreadable stirring in his expression. "Where is she?" Lena demanded suddenly, the accusation leaping from her lips before she had even processed it herself. "Who?" Mark asked with false innocence that made her clenched fists tremble against the countertop. "Jill," she said, her heart pounding. "Where is she?" His expression hardened. "I told you I'm not in contact with her." She laughed bitterly. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? You think this is just me being jealous?" The words dripped with betrayal, anger boiling beneath her skin, igniting a warmth she hadn't felt in so long. "Look, it's a clean break, I swear," he insisted, though she could hear the cracks forming in his voice. "Marks of panic. But you lied to me about messaging her a month ago. You hid it. You're still talking to her." Each jagged line drew closer to his heart. She was ready to pull it out, clutch it in her hands, and squeeze until it burst. "Are we seriously having this conversation again?" Mark flushed, stepping back defensively. "I care about our marriage. I care about us. I feel like I'm losing myself in a maze of your secrets." The accusation hung in the air. Suddenly his mask slipped, revealing the irritation beneath the surface. "You keep bringing her up, Lena. I can't live my life resenting my past." Shouting erupted, filling every corner of the small space, completely unaware that their quiet home was already filled with a history of unspoken hurt. "Resent? Is that the best you can come up with?" She spat, aware that her ferocity surprised. Was it truly resentment that guided her feelings, or something deeper, a conflicting betrayal, born from the stories she could never untangle? Mark turned away, running his hands through his hair as if to scrub her criticisms from his brain. "It's not about her," he said, voice low, almost tender. "It's about us. Is it? Because you've made it about her for years." His eyes flickered, hurt mixing with defensiveness. It had been like this for weeks, months even. Their last confrontation laid the groundwork for a truth she was tired of tiptoeing around. They tried counseling once, twice. The past blended with the present like oil and water, until the stains were so intertwined she'd forgotten what clarity felt like. "I trusted you," she whispered, as a tear slipped down her cheek, the truth pouring from the cracks of their marriage. Anger, resentment, and heartbreak were cascading into each other, forming a raging sea of doubt. "And you made me feel like a fool." "Don't say that." Mark's voice faltered when he reached out to her, but she shoved him away with a gasp, desiring to be free of the weight he carried, one that had blurred her vision from the beginning. "Why can't you see what you've done to me? To us?" The passionate ache coursed through her. Each cry was filled with years of unfulfilled expectations, desires, and dreams left to rot. He blinked then, blinking back emotions at her anger. "You're being overdramatic." Anger flared within her. "I'm being realistic. There's nothing dramatic about feeling betrayed." "You're acting like it's nothing." "I never touched her, I swear." "Lying doesn't make it better." The roar launched her forward, fists clenching with rage as she bared her truth. "I'm afraid I'll wake up tomorrow and you'll still be talking to her." She was ready to scream at him, a voice raised in protest against the betrayals, all that heartache he'd so willingly invited into her life. Choking back the lump in her throat, she took a step back and away from him, as if fleeing a battlefield. The memories began surfacing, conversations shared with friends who didn't know the full story. The late-night calls to her mom, who soothed her pain yet inadvertently supported her imprisonment. Doubt fueled her memory. It painted all their moments from that innocent engagement to every wedding photo, captured in the glow of joy against the backdrop of a shattered union. In each picture, she felt suffocated by a guilt that had taken root. Perhaps she was the one clinging to a compromise, sacrificing her happiness for someone eternally anchored in his past. Everything they had felt rehearsed, like the sparkling moments treasured now, reflected her desperation for love, instead of love itself. "Whatever you think you are, you're not," he started, interrupting her thoughts. But she didn't care. Lena stepped away from him toward the narrow hallway that led to their rooms, feeling small under the weight of despair. The haunting voice of their once perfect facade echoed through her mind as she walked away from the man who had been both her greatest love and cruel joker. "It's all a game to you, isn't it?" she said finally beneath her breath, her spine straightening as she faced the reality of their entanglement. He was still lurking nearby, but she could feel the growing distance between them. A chasm full of distrust where the love once flourished vibrantly. "I loved you." Mark's voice almost cracked, an echo of desperation threaded with a shaky breath. But hearing him say those words invited no solace. "Did you ever choose me?" she whispered, tears pouring forth at the final confrontation. As his silence filled the void between them, the truth was carved boldly into her heart. The betrayal had taken root, but revenge was an idea she hadn't yet rendered. What had been dormant now stirred deep within her as she pictured a life beyond these walls, a revenge against the time he had stolen and the energy he drained. Lena turned back to him, her anger boiling away to reveal clarity underneath. The tears blurred her vision as they fell, boiling down the pain into a shocking clarity. There was betrayal to uncover, hidden identities to expose, and she was done living in his shadow, done being the forgotten piece in a puzzle he strung along. This wasn't just about Mark and Jill anymore. It was about a woman rising from the ashes of deceit. It was the beginning of her fight for freedom, not only from him, but from the ever-tightening binds of their history. As she turned away from his pathetic, broken apologies, a determined whisper curled around her heart. She would take back everything she lost, and this time the betrayal wasn't just a wound. It was a weapon, a motivation to regain her power, her voice, and ultimately her revenge. The night wore on, the stars settling quietly above as Lena began to craft a plan, ready to rewrite their script and reclaim her life. The darkness held promise. It was from here the shadows would no longer shame her. They would empower her heart to rise and retaliate against everything Mark had taken from her. Though she had always seen it in the moments before sleep, fear was now transformed into resolve. She would no longer fit the mold she had been cast in. The journey of betrayal and revenge was starting, and this time it would be her hand forging the flames of their demise, crafting a legacy that would forever haunt those who had wronged her. Above everything else, she was ready to reclaim her spirit with the ghost of vengeance as her guide. As weeks rolled into months, Lena stood in the clearing darkness of the living room, the anxious smattering of shadows embracing her as she formulated her retribution. This wasn't just about gathering evidence against Mark's reeling relationship with Jill. This was about seizing control of her life, reclaiming her dignity from the ruins of betrayal. Memories of each time he had disrespected her flooded back with fiery clarity, the late-night messages he thought she wouldn't notice, the excuses, the gaslighting. There was nothing innocent left in their marriage. Every moment was tainted with deception. The veil had lifted, and she could finally see him for who he was, a man too weak to sever himself from his past, a coward hiding behind lies. She fought against the tears threatening to spill over. Anger surged within her. Each pulse of her heart drummed a message of resolution. With steady breaths, she grabbed her phone and began a mission to uncover every detail of his lies, each hidden message and every neglected promise. The thought of revenge danced on the precipice of her thoughts. She mustn't soften. The weight of betrayal hung heavy on her shoulders, but she would transform that weight into wrath. As dawn slowly spilled sunlight into her world, she found herself scrolling through their shared conversations. Knowing his conversations with Jill would still be somewhere in the murky depths of his devices, she meticulously began tracing the threads of deceit, imagery of moments he had tried to create around her, swimming in her mind. Mark, in between calloused gestures of love, feigned beneath mundane responsibilities, an idea that should have been laid to rest years ago. She wondered how deeply that heart could delve into betrayal before it collapsed under the weight of his own decisions. Her first step was setting up a hidden device to monitor Mark's communications. She placed an app on his phone without his knowledge, camouflaged as a simple game. It felt thrilling, intoxicating even. The inevitable confrontation simmering beneath the surface now gave Lena direction. With this new tool, she would expose his betrayal and have all the details lined up to confront him, laying every scrap of deceit before him. The days passed slowly, filled with a meticulous daily grind that veiled her true intentions. Each interaction she had with Mark felt like fated chess moves, preceding an inevitable checkmate. He remained oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond his sight. Their son Elijah learned to retain his laughter, drawing Lena into tender moments of respite, turning her anguish into determination. "I got us tickets to the fair," Mark exclaimed one evening after work, that same rehearsed enthusiasm spilling over as if the weight of their struggles didn't crush down like a boulder. Lena plastered a smile on her face, but her heart felt hollow, suffocated by the echoes of his half-truths. "Sounds fun," she replied, masking her discomfort within the layers of her anguish. As the days grew into weeks, her resolve hardened into steel. Lena was no longer just reacting, but actively plotting. The betrayal burned in her chest and aimed her at a single purpose. She wanted to watch Mark suffer as she had suffered. One rainy afternoon, armed with new evidence, Lena sifted through their past messages, collecting pieces that fit like shards of glass, forming a weapon. It was time to confront him, to expose his lies, shredding apart the fabric of their perfect life. Mark had tried to spin that web of deceit into something tangible, his disloyalty manifesting in new levels of gaslighting and arrogance. Day after day, he showed no interest in her hurt, having almost convinced himself she would stay despite the orchestrated chaos surrounding them. Finally, a confrontation loomed, and she could almost taste the culmination of her secret surveillance and emotional growth filling the air. On the night of their anniversary, the irony weighed heavily on her. It would feel deeply satisfying to render her judgment as she started the fiery purging of her captive emotions. That evening, she prepared their favorite meal with deliberate ease, ensuring the table was set to perfection. The lingering sense of betrayal taunted her while also filling her with a thrill. As Mark led Elijah away for the evening's activities, Lena typed furiously on her phone, stringing together revelations that would eventually spark a critical confrontation. When they finally settled for dinner, Mark chatted with the impression of blissful ignorance, oblivious to the shattering tsunami surging within her as she laid down the first course before him. "What are you thinking? About how cute Elijah and I were earlier?" he asked, flipping casually through his phone under the table, his ignorance maddeningly bold. "Actually," Lena held back a smile, ready to unleash like a storm, "I was thinking about all the times you haven't respected me, about all the messages you've sent to Jill and trying to cover it up." He froze, the color draining from his face. "What do you mean?" The air turned electric around them, a slipstream of silence looming above their table, now entirely transformed into a battleground. The cuffs of tension around her heart tightened, but Lena pushed through, revealing her findings one at a time. "You didn't think I'd find out, did you? All those messages? It's like a delusional game to you, but you gotta realize a player can only be played for so long. What was it you said last week? That we should just forget about the past? Is that really what you think?" Each question hung heavily in the air. For every word spoken, she plunged the knife deeper into his consciousness, awakening the truth buried beneath his lies. "You spent our entire lives dancing around the truth with Jill. Did you think I was too naive to understand? I wasn't lying to you. I was trying to be polite." He stumbled, backtracking, scrabbling for a closure that no longer existed. "Polite?" Her laughter sliced through the tension like a shard of glass. "This politeness includes sending her messages while I went through personal turmoil raised by your betrayal? You really thought all of this would amount to some happy ending for us?" "Lena, please," he began, but she raised a hand, silencing him. The power of her voice calmed the storm surging within her as she charged ahead. "In all the years we've been together, I trusted you when you asked for my trust again and again. But you continued lying to my face." She leaned forward. The last pieces of restraint melted away in a flood of fierce resolve. "I'm finished with the lies, Mark. I've spent too long being disrespected while you played the victim, hiding behind excuses." The coward's facade cracked, moments of consequence pulling her into deeper emotional turmoil. The realization etched itself into his face. A moment frozen in fear, unraveling with increasing stakes. Before he could respond, she upturned the final plans. The app on his phone, the evidence stacked higher than the years of wrongs he had put on her shoulders. "I saw everything on your phone. You're still communicating with her? I was done being your emotional punching bag while you flirted with the past." "Lena, this isn't what it looks like," he pleaded, the air thick with desperation. A triumphant smile crept across her lips, the exhilarating taste of victory seeping in. "Oh, but it is exactly what it looks like." As she watched the anguish twist his features, the earlier murmur of rage that built within her was now manifested. With venom on her lips, she seethed a response that would pierce straight through the facade he'd carefully created around her, an unfiltered truth slicing the air crisp around them. "You should know what's coming, Mark. After all this time pretending to be someone you're not, don't you think it's time you faced what you've put me through in front of everyone? You think I'm about to sit here with you smiling in the midst of this betrayal?" Her laughter turned dark, and it felt like an echo in the silence around them, feeding the fire she desired to instigate within his soul. "Welcome to the truth parade, and everyone will know exactly who you are." Mark's eyes widened in horror, pieces of dread painting themselves across his face. Realization dawned on him. He had lost control, had landed himself squarely in the tempest dragging him down. "Lena, no!" he begged, but sharp realization pressed deeper within her as she locked eyes with him, completely unyielded to the man who had ruined so much. "Trust is like glass, Mark. Once broken, it can never be restored. I am to being the fool with a half-life, and perhaps now everything will finally be clear to you." She leaned back, letting the quietness settle before she rose slowly, focusing her energy forward to finish what she'd begun. "I'm done," she stated, leaving dread lingering in the air between them like an afterthought. She turned to walk away, knowing full well that this was not an end, but a beginning of brutal reckoning that would mark the end of everything they had once built. As she reached the door, Mark shouted her name in desperation. "Lena, where are you going?" With each step, she steeled herself against the emotional onslaught. She had found justice after tolerating years of turmoil, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. His cries echoed through their home, but her heart surged not with pity but with renewal. "Don't follow me. You wanted to play a game, and now the rules will change. That's the price of breaking trust." She looked over her shoulder, fire blazing her eyes with fierce determination. "Remember, depths of betrayal only wade deeper when you drown in your own creations." As she stepped out into the night, she could only sense the victory radiating through her, like the final climax in an enduring narrative where justice had finally returned, echoing through the void left by his lies. The shadows couldn't bind her anymore. No more daylight would pretend to hide behind an unresolved, anguished past. This was her rebirth, a darkness cloaked in beautiful revenge, and she would rise, leaving him behind to grapple with the truth he tried so desperately to hide. And somewhere in the air, filled with euphoric revenge, she whispered one last promise to herself. She would never look back again. Days morphed into weeks, and as she crafted her plan, Lena also had the subconscious comfort emerging from her son's innocent world. His laughter reminding her of something pure that still existed amidst the darkness. But she never forgot the betrayal that simmered just beneath the veneer of their family. Finally, the spoils of her work bore fruit. Mark had become increasingly detached, oblivious to the slow morphing of their reality. He continued enabling Jill's narrative, while Lena drew more connections, almost relishing in the notion of the storm she was preparing to unleash upon him. Their intimate moments felt hollow, dull, leading her to grow further embittered. Mark was wrestling with the guilt of out-charming Jill in the face of his own domestic sins. One fateful evening, just before a weekend he had eagerly planned, Lena found an email from Jill revealing so much more than just a petty past-it, snarled with yearning, a desperate longing for Mark that squeezed Lena's heart like a vice. It made her resent him all the more. Days of tension mounted, leading towards a weekend gathering of couples in their friend's circle. It would be the perfect stage for her confrontation. Lena fevered with anticipation, a fiend sharpening her blade behind the curtains, ready to pierce. The night of the gathering, smiles were painted on their faces, not a soul suspecting the tempest brewing beneath Lena's serenity. Mark, blissfully unaware, laughed and chatted with their closest friends, presenting the image of a dutiful husband, determined to shake the past like a tag-along child. Lena stewed silently, pacing in her mind with every gesture he made. As they settled into the gathering, she was consumed with a newfound courage, rising amidst a crowd, tiptoeing across casual superficiality into a jagged emotional abyss. She watched him order drinks, engaged in unnecessary politeness toward those dear friends, while she simmered beside him, the dynamic honing sharper edges in her heart. As the evening wore on, she finally felt the pressure build. With all eyes open towards a narrative laden with misplaced faith, Lena stood up, dismissing any hint of shyness now running through her veins. "I have something to say," she proclaimed, unwavering before her audience. Mark turned sharply to her, confusion lighting up his face, but couldn't stop her momentum. "Lena, wait. No, you're going to hear me." She cut him off, taking a deep breath, fueling the confidence screaming within her that was tired of being lost. "While we present ourselves as a family, I feel it's time the truth surrounding our union comes into the light." Eyes flashed towards her impeccably calm face. There was shock laid over disbelief among their friends. "It's amazing how easily you've duped everyone, Mark," she continued, each word a bomb detonating, sinking into the silence, thickening the atmosphere. "The lies, the manipulations, your ongoing relationship with Jill was solely intended to keep me distracted while you played husband." She lifted an email from her purse, glancing at Mark, reading its contents aloud. "And you thought I'd stay in ignorance?" The words fell heavy around them. Mark was left choking on the desperation of his deception. "I trusted you," she seethed further, her face like thunder, her face like thunder. "You brought another woman into this sacred space we've created, leaving me to counter your absence, convincing myself this was all normal." Laughter turned scornful, echoing across the gathering as Lena reveled in uncovering the truth, watching it spiral into full view. "Honestly, I sometimes thought I had gotten lost in your charm and charisma while the betrayal laid itself bare before me." Mark's face bent with disbelief, not the innocent bear, but the fading of the face she once adored. No empathy remained for him. It was laid to waste among their friends, who were now left aghast. "You've manipulated all of your stories while I've been out here crafting and understanding reality for our son. But that's done. Now, we're all experiencing the greatest truth together." "Lena, please." Mark's voice was honest but weak, folding under pressure. Her heart thudded in rhythm with the electrifying atmosphere. She wanted to feel vindicated, enthralled by the thrill of revenge as she delivered her final sentence. "You want to be a part of our son's life? You'll have to prove you're half the man you claim to be. And let's let them all know exactly what you've chosen to be." Gasps filled the air, and more hearts turned cold with acceptance of unraveling ties. Mark stood there, a snapshot of defeat cloaked in shame, as Lena turned on her heels, leaving behind the debris covered in deception. The laughter from earlier transformed into disbelief. There was no sympathy left to waste on his narrative. As she reached the doorway, Lena paused just long enough to amble backward over her shoulder, letting her words hang like steel. "For a man chasing a ghost, there's nothing but emptiness left. Sights of the lessons left behind. Mark, your heart shall serve only as a mirror to your own reflection and nothing else." With finality, she stepped out under a heavy night sky filled with new possibilities, a thrill surging through her veins. The weight of betrayal replaced with the weight of independence, like power magnified. The laughter and whispers receded. The storm outside swallowed her soul as she embraced liberation, each step echoing confidence. She had crossed boundaries drawn by someone else's expectations, and emerged as a woman reborn from the ashes of a twisted fate. Lena turned her back on that life, carving her way back towards freedom, heart racing with possibilities, fueling a fire stoked by vengeance. The ghosts of betrayal would soon incinerate away, but first, the truth would reign as shining armor, implanting a vision of revival that would remain timeless. This wasn't just about Mark. It was about the commitment she had to herself, and she would never look back again.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like.